This is RiverTalks with Jonathan Brush, President and CEO of Unbound.
All of us have unique experiences that give us unique insight into this strange old world that we live in, to the fellow people made in God's image that inhabit it with us. And that gives you unique insight into that. And then you get a chance to share that insight with other people. And the older you get, the more gray you get in your beard, like me, the more times you've been around the sun, the more of those things you collect. So at some point, you have both the responsibility and an opportunity to share those, to give back to those who've come before and say, hey, I've been around and seen this before. I've seen this pattern. I've seen this thing take place. I can give you some help with this. And that's a good thing. And, it doesn't matter what age you are, you're uniquely you. You've seen things nobody else has seen. And so at any age, you can do this. So this is not like an exclusive thing for certain people that are at a certain age or a certain experience. No, everybody has unique experiences, allows them to uniquely teach, instruct, and help and guide other people. But there's just the reality that the older somebody gets, the more experiences they accumulate, the more they've got to pull from, right? And I would say the more responsibility they have to give back in a fashion that allows the experiences that God has put in your life to be able to use to help other people. But here's where there's a major pitfall. And that pitfall is the pitfall of advice. And here's something that if you haven't learned yet, you will learn. And what that thing is that it is way more fun. It's way more fun to give advice than to take advice, to listen to advice, which, sort of ironic doing this little podcast here. I'm basically saying it's a lot more fun for me to be talking to you than it is for you to be listening, but that's true. And the more specific the advice is, the more fun it is for the person giving it because they know all about it in the way nobody else does, and the least useful it is for the person hearing it. I have this saying when I talk to somebody. I say, I want to tell you something to begin with. I will try hard not to give you advice. And if I give you advice, I want you to listen carefully. If it sounds like advice, I want you to start to ignore it. And what I mean by that is not that I don't have any good advice to give. And I don't mean that it's never appropriate to give advice. There's times when advice is in fact necessary. But you should be cautious about it because advice by its very nature is advice that comes from your specific experiences. And those experiences were indeed specific to you, which means they have limited practicality and application to somebody else. So when you are tempted to give advice to somebody, you say, I know this really well because it happened to me. I'm an expert at it because I lived it. And so I can talk about it in great detail and I can give this very specific detail. And I say, this happened to me and this is what I did. And this is how I fixed this problem. And this is blah, 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 blah. And unless that person is having the exact same problem as you, generally it's not typically very helpful. There's exceptions to this, right? My muffler fell off my car. I have the same car, or I also drive a car. And the muffler fell off my car, and this is how I fixed it. Okay, well, that is indeed a specific circumstance that has specific needs that matches. But when we get to things like life advice, I'm having this argument with my friend. Oh, I also had an argument with my friend, and let me explain to you exactly what I did, and this is how I resolved it. Well, okay, sort of, maybe kind of that's helpful, but we're talking about my friend, not your friend. There was an argument about something else, and then I'm me, not you, and, kind of breaks down pretty quick, right? So something to remember and something to keep in mind and something that I try to keep in mind is that I don't think that I have the ability, I'm not God, I don't have the ability to create new truth. It's not like I suddenly have here's this new thing like gravity that I invented or all of a sudden I discovered. No, I think that when it comes to these kinds of things, truth is always there, and truth is not to be created. Truth is to be understood. And to understand truth requires perspective. In other words, it's true because it's true. And when you see it and you understand it, you go, this is true. This is, I have to take this into account. I can't live my life different from this because this is true, capital T, true. Well, how do you get to that? We get that you get there from perspective by being able to understand something a different way that you kind of move over and go, oh, I didn't see it before, but now I see it. It was there the whole time, but I didn't understand it. I didn't quite comprehend, right? So when somebody comes to me and they want advice or they have a problem or they have something and I'm trying to help them, I try to remember not to give them advice and say, I saw this before, do this. I try instead to think about what is the thing that's true no matter what in this circumstance? And how can I ask questions and perhaps illustrate this in a way that gives this person new perspective so they can see this truth? And the beauty of this situation is that you don't have to fully understand everything that's going on, right? You don't have to fully comprehend it. You can just say, I'm listening. I heard what you said. I see what you're talking about there. I have some experience. Let me ask you some questions so we can look at this and think about this differently. Let me suggest some alternative ways for you to think about this. And let me point out some things that perhaps you're not thinking about. And then when you look at all those things, consider that. And did that change of perspective allow you to understand things differently? And I have found that almost always that is the case. But even more exciting is that when people get to the conclusion that way, they don't get to it because I told them. They got to it because they figured it out. And they figured it out in the context of their life, with the circumstances that only they know, and with the nuances that only they're privy to in this situation. And so it lands in a way that's much more effective. It's much more applicable, and it makes a difference in a bigger way. So the next time somebody asks you for advice, commit to not doing that, not giving advice. Instead, commit to asking questions and trying to illustrate things in such a way that you can find the thing that's true no matter what. Provide perspective on that, and let the other person use that perspective on truth to figure out their own problem.